President Joe Biden began this year's summit of Pacific Island nations with an apology and an acknowledgement. First, giving his regrets for canceling a visit to Papua New Guinea in May amid domestic political drama, and then hailing U.S. diplomatic recognition of the Cook Islands and the tiny island nation of Niue. He also focused on the climate concerns identified by the 18 Pacific Island Forum nations and pledged funds for climate assistance and infrastructure.
We hear your warnings of a rising sea that would they pose an existential threat to your nations. We hear your calls for reassurance that you never will lose your statehood or membership of the UN as a result of a climate crisis.
These 18 member states have been battlegrounds of colonial conquest for centuries. The Cook Islands, for instance, are named after the intrepid Captain James Cook, the British adventurer who in the late 18th century violently conquered indigenous lands across the wide expanse of the Pacific from Australia to Canada for the crown. That's something not lost on Prime Minister Mark Brown of the Cook Islands, who emphasized the relationship his country seeks with the world superpower.
We have an opportunity here, as the Pacific Islands Forum and as the United States, to develop our partnerships for prosperity.
But there's one name none of the leaders uttered in their public comments. Analysts say that China's increased ambitions, such as its security pact with the Solomon Islands, whose leaders skipped the Washington summit, is part of the calculation for the United States' increased engagement. But not all of it.
The United States has been one of the most recalcitrant countries in the world on looking at the question of financing for climate adaptation. If you're an island in the Pacific dealing with rapidly rising sea levels and storm surges and increase in frequency of major storms, climate adaptation is the issue. It's existential. And so that's the real front lines of the conversation between the Pacific Islands and the West, especially the United States.
But those who watch that wide expanse of ocean say there is one thing the leader of the world's wealthiest nation cannot promise: money. That's up to Congress, the elected body currently embroiled in a political standoff over funding. If members don't resolve that by month's end, the U.S. government will shut down.
The U.S. made a lot of commitments last year in its first Pacific Islands Summit. Very sensible ideas, very sensible proposals. The big challenge is that once it went up to Congress, things got snagged, and I think that's the issue that all sort of commitments that the White House makes in this or in anything else is going to face, which is making sure that Congress approves it.
These leaders will likely have a chance to discuss that among themselves when they meet again in November without Biden in the Cook Islands. Anita Powell, VOA News, Washington.